the March 25th, 2021 APC meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Gary, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, roll call.
Darren Price.
Here.
Leota King.
Present.
Brian Durham.
Here.
Dale Munson.
Here.
Gary Naylor.
Here.
Robert Stewart. He's absent. Brian Robb.
Here.
Bill Mackey. Brian Hensley. Bill McDaniel.
Present.
Jeff Wessling.
Present.
And myself.
Just information, I know I sent an email out, but both Mr. Stewart and then also Mr. Mackey both let me know that they weren't going to be in town. I didn't hear from Brian, but Brian's typically been pretty good about letting me know when he wasn't going to be here. And maybe because it's spring break.
Understandable. So our first agenda item is the comprehensive plan. I don't have any particular update on that. Jeff, I don't know if you have anything with the consultant.
I have not heard a word on the conference.
I do know we do have a committee formed and are slowly putting that together. It's kind of at a standstill, at least for now. Second item, zoning code. I sent out earlier last week a revised confined feeding on what we had talked about last month. Gary, particularly the only change, if you look on section submission requirements and approval process, the biggest change in there is proof of an approved drainage plan from the Fayette County Drainage Board is the only change that was in there, really to deal with the issues of water runoff at a potential site. I did some digging into what we could do as the Planning Commission, and that's kind of the Fayette County Drainage Board's purview to make that decision. So to make them at least be required to get their approval is what we can do as far as our, what our reins are on what we can do for that. And above that, the ensuring that a person is in compliance with the Department of Environmental Management, so IDEM. There are a lot of things that we as a board can't regulate, but IDEM has the authority to regulate, particularly things to do with water in the state of Indiana. IDEM kind of has the last say. So it's their rules that we have to go by. We can't make our rules more than what IDEM's requirements are because they're the agency responsible for that. So we can at least say they have to meet IDEM's rules.
And, well, one of the things is that is, because they send in the application then, but they also then receive the approval, well, for the NPDES permit, they get the approval then from IDEM.
Yeah.
So that would be what would probably be the approval that's necessary with IDEM right there with that.
And then IDEM also is responsible for continued monitoring of any complaints about groundwater contamination, any type of something that might affect the water in an area. IDEM has privy over that. So to almost include it, we're exceeding our authority under the Indiana Code. Jeff, what's a better way of saying that we kind of have to play within the rules of what the state of Indiana says we can and
Well, there's
can't
some
do?
things that we're preempted from. Now, I think that it's appropriate then for an actual drainage plan to be prepared, because after all, the drainage plans are prepared for subdivisions and other larger ones. So I would think that would be appropriate, but then with whatever the standards are. So if there's a drainage plan that's actually submitted and approved by IDEM as part of the CFO application, I would think that would probably be sufficient. Would that be correct, Jeff?
Potentially. I mean, I think what our president's saying is that essentially that there is, I mean, that you hear of the home rule
Yeah.
doctrine where we have that, but there are times when that's preempted if there's state legislation on it
Yep.
already. If there's state legislation, we can't do anything to modify that. That is, it's state that essentially is the one responsible for that. And this is kind of an interesting issue to me, whether or not the state's responsible for regulating this anyway. I think there's a pretty strong argument for that they are. I think there's a lot of strong argument that they are for water quality. I don't think we are in the business of regulating water quality. The more I dive into this, the more I think they might be actually responsible for water quantity as well, which is kind of what we're discussing here.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I think I think I agree with that, Jeff, that we're talking about quantity more so than quality.
quality is something that people traditionally think of, and that's outside of our.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause that'd be
Water
separate.
quality has always been considered potentially ours, but the more I look into this, the more I kind of have some conversations and do some research, the more I'm thinking that we might not even be really fully in charge of the water quality issue. So it's an interesting thought. I mean, there's going to be regulations on the water quality. There's some ideas that we can play around with, and some things that I would potentially recommend. I know on some of these larger CFOs, there's state regulation on them anyway as far as water quantity. And part of, one thing I've thought of is, can we go ahead and try to force them into that category anyway? To be every CFO in Fayette County be considered to be that size of a CFO that would then have to answer to the state in regards to water quantity. And if there are any complaints from it, what that does when you're in that category is if there's complaints with adjoining landowners, then they can complain through the state. There's actually a process for how they can repair if there are water quantity issues.
Yeah, 'cause the,
But right now, it's only a certain size CFO meets that category in the state.
yeah, 'cause
But if we could find something that would say that every CFO in Fayette County that were ever made here were in that category,
yeah.
then that gives an avenue for adjoining landowners to complain if there's, hey, my water, my well is drying up, and here's why. And then they have actual plans to remedy that situation. It may be bringing water in to the
But you,
facility.
now you're talking about subsurface water,
Yes,
water table.
right.
But I
You're
think
talking
what I
about
was
runoff.
referring to was runoff.
Okay.
Yeah, from
Oh,
the
you're talking about like, okay.
Indiana
I got you.
drainage laws.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I guess, as I recall, we had to submit a drainage plan to IDEM in the past, as far as the CAFO permitted operation.
We have, or the actual applicant?
When the applicant, I mean, the owner of the
yes,
operation.
yes.
Now, I guess what I'm wondering, could we put that stipulation that plan is in place prior to allowing the permit, local permit?
That plan is in place, or that plan is accepted?
Then it-
That it has been accepted by IDEM?
Well, I
Because
think-
I'm not sure if that's part of the permit process.
Yeah, so nobody's gonna, without the IDEM approval, I mean, it doesn't make sense to try to.
Oh, no
apply.
problem.
Because
Yeah, you have to have IDEM's approval.
Well, the
before-
problem is if
drainage
IDEM
plan-
doesn't require that, then they're not gonna go ahead and approve something they don't require.
Yeah,
Our drainage plan
it's
was
section
prior,
5.
or after the fact that our buildings were there. We had to submit drainage plans.
Okay.
So what I'm saying, could we, as a local board, require them to have that drainage plan in place prior to issuing a building permit?
Certainly, we just have to
Okay.
make sure that IDEM will look at that before, if they don't,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Well, and that's why we
You're
put
saying, you're
proof of
talking about a
a,
pre-existing one that you had to submit the plan for.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't know if they require that
Right.
But,
pre-zoning or not.
Which is why we,
I don't want to get into something where we put something in the ordinance that says you have to do this, and that's something that can't be done because IDM says we're not going to look at that, we're not going
Right.
to accept that yet.
Okay.
Now, I don't know that,
But the
why
county-
that would make
But,
sense
but
why they
if,
would do it.
I guess what I'm going back to
Right.
what Brian and I discussed was if we give or ask them to submit that plan to our drainage board
Yes.
yes, and that's included in here.
and.
Now, it wasn't before, but
Yeah,
now it's in
and
here.
where our local drainage board creates minimum standards,
Sure.
drainage runoff
Absolutely.
standards. And then as long as they've met the commissioners or the drainage board requirements, then we can issue a permit. And I guess
Yeah.
that's what Brian and I had come to the
Yeah.
conclusion of.
And that's no different than to get a house, to get a permit, you have to have approval of septic. from the
But I,
Board of Health.
but I told Brian, past practices, or past experience, the drainage board doesn't have anything like that. So I wondered if, I brought up the question, could the APC create those minimum standards as a model, or take some models to the drainage board and ask them to consider adopting it for all.
I would say that we could offer a
Not just
recommendation,
CAFO.
I mean, based on our,
Not just CAFOs, but all commercial.
on what is required by planning boards. We could offer a recommendation
Well, I guess
to,
some language that emphasizes that, okay, something to the drainage board that indicates they're gonna meet the requirements of the Indiana drainage laws, that they're not gonna shed any more water than prior to the development.
Yeah, I mean, because I know, and Jeff, you can probably speak to it as well, we've had past people come to the drainage board, companies, request permission for or request information on a drainage plan, and our county does not have any drainage plan.
So your request is also to implement a county drainage plan?
Yeah, so that, there's no sense in putting the language in here if the county doesn't have a plan. A required plan.
Okay, so really all that the county drainage board has is overseeing the legal drains right now, nothing else.
Well, I think they have other
Yeah.
responsibilities legislatively.
Yeah.
We're just not doing them.
and I think we can potentially come up with a recommendation for
My-
what that plan could look like. I mean,
My
that's
only
our-
concern is don't put the language in there if a business or a company goes to the drainage board and says, and they say, well, we don't have any requirements, so you can go ahead. Well, they just wasted their time. They wasted a day's meeting.
And we're also gonna risk creating something that can't be done. Like, I don't want to have something in this ordinance that says you gotta do this and expect another entity to produce something
Right.
Then,
that concerns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's what
you're
I'm saying. That's
your
what I'm
concern.
saying.
Right,
I don't want the language in here
right.
if we don't give the drainage board the tools to make the requirement, or put the requirement out there.
But then.
But evidently, there are drainage plans that are submitted to counties because Gordon and Associates wouldn't have brought that application to us or request to us on the
I can't remember that.
DNA genetics.
Well,
And one that passed. Well, we don't have any requirements, so
It's passed.
it's,
Yeah,
well, I don't know if this would be appropriate, but in the subdivision regulations, you know, if you build a subdivision, there is a requirement in there then for the drainage plan. So,
But that's
So
just-
who
but
is that
that's-
approved
but
by?
That's just them submitting a drainage plan to the board.
exactly.
That's the difference. That's them submitting a drainage plan to us where they explain here is
Here's
what they
how it's gonna-
expect the routine drainage to be, and here's how they expect it to work. Which,
then why
to me,
have,
makes the most sense rather than,
but Jeff, why have that language or requirements? Why have them go through all that if we don't know whether it's good enough, a good enough plan or not?
well, I mean, that's part of what you're here for, is to determine whether or not it's
Yeah.
a good enough plan.
But if we don't have any
guidelines.
Guidelines.
You're gonna have state guidelines, you're gonna have,
There's the series of the calculations that are run with it. For example, when the few times that we had through is, Jerry would run through the calculations. The surveyors, I think, can run through the calculation, doesn't take an engineer, but also surveyor can design the drainage plan, say for subdivisions or other projects. The one that was built with where the Goodwill's at. Well, they passed that through, but in that case, they also went through the review was also with the city of Connersville because it was within their threshold as was it Rule 5.
let me ask you, why are we, I've not thought about it yet, and I'm trying to get my head around it. Why are we so concerned with the displaced drainage? I mean, this is no different than a barn, right? I mean, as far as,
The problem that
drainage
we're
issues.
starting to see is the more roofs we have, the more
of course,
runoff we have.
right.
And we
But this
can't-
isn't unique to CFOs, it's just the structure, correct?
Yeah, and
So-
that's why I'm
Right.
saying no, not just CFOs.
Right.
I think we ought to address it in every commercial or every building permit we
But do you do it in
issue.
every garage, I mean, when do you stop?
Well,
I mean,
the city charges for everything, everyone, and everything,
Yeah, for every structure, every
you know?
impermeable surface, it
And-
costs you more money.
And we have, I guess where I'm coming from, and where I got to thinking about it was, we have seen over the decades, fences tore out, fields made larger, and we've seen washes that we've never seen before.
And that's what the drainage board does right now, is deals with, right, that's, you
On
saw it.
flat lands.
Right.
You know, and we're gonna have, the more buildings we have built,
Absolutely.
the more problems we're gonna have. I see businesses grow and their drainage plan doesn't change and gutters become, side ditches become gutters,
True.
so to speak,
Yeah,
erosion problems and so on and so forth, because we don't address the runoff problems as those businesses expand.
And your floodplain expands.
Yeah, and
because the floodplains actually, I saw 2 floodplain maps recently in a not a very long period of time, and they had almost drastically changed the 2014 and the 2007? Like when you layer them together, they're nowhere close to being the exact same over a period of time.
I mean, if we introduce solar, we're gonna have an extreme,
Well, I think
Drainage problems.
Solar's that is a significant concern with solar.
so I really think
Right.
if the county's not prepared all the way around with drainage, with,
Because when you look at some of the solar ordinances that have been adopted, okay, they're making reference to drainage plan approved by the county drainage board, a lot of these ordinances.
Yes.
So,
and if the county doesn't, if the county doesn't have any guidelines to go by, they can bring any plan in, and how can the county not?
Well, any plan
Go
can be
along with it.
accepted, any plan can be rejected at that point,
Yeah.
too.
Um,
Now you're opening yourself up for litigation.
Yeah.
But,
But Jeff,
Yeah.
where you're,
if there's state rules on this, right now, I mean,
it's not something I'm extremely well versed on, but yeah, I'm
so I mean,
assuming some
at
type
least
of.
there's some sort of
some type
guideline right
regulation.
now.
that we
right?
could create and.
So that could be modified, or,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I don't know if you modify it, but at least that's
That's
something
yeah.
to go by and put it in place and.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's gonna be some type of regulation out there. Do I know that right off the top of my head?
Right,
Right.
but I mean,
Yeah.
there's something, and you just say they haven't had it in place, which I don't understand that, but, it seems to me that there ought to be at least something, a guideline to go by, and then either
I would
modify.
assume, just like the city, for instance, has their stormwater fees. And I was told by Brad that each time you make a change to your property, it's recalculated. So there must be some kind of equations that
Right,
that we can go by.
Well, and then
As a county.
the city has its own drainage board that's different than the county's. I mean, I can
You're
talk
talking
to,
fee structure though.
Yeah.
I guess when I see drainage plan,
yeah, I wasn't talking fee structure.
No, no,
you're talking, but look, I don't know.
But they use some kind of equation of of how much water's coming off that property
Yeah, so
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
yeah,
to
that's,
create that fee. So
where
if,
that's gonna go,
you know, and I don't know whether the state regs regulate that you, the stormwater, you cannot, you can't allow any more stormwater off of that new development leave your property in so many hours, or, you know,
yeah, I don't know the answer.
I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that.
Care-
I think we do underestimate how important it is when a new structure's up, how much it does displace water. I mean, these are somewhat of a displacement. Solar's gonna be a significant displacement.
but I think Carrie's got,
If I may, as a,
yeah.
I'm happy at your request to give my opinion on what I think should happen here, but I think really the better use of my knowledge is not on opinion, but on how it works in other counties and what the state does and doesn't have. Just a little bit of like Stormwater 101 stuff. So essentially, Connorsville city, the city limits, is actually what's called an MS4. So that means at the state level, the city of Connorsville is responsible for all of the stormwater, right? So they're responsible for the stormwater that goes through the plant. They're also responsible for the stormwater that's discharged through directly. That is why if you're going to build something within city limits, you have to go to the utilities office and talk to them about what you're going to do with not only your erosion runoff, because you're breaking ground, you have the erosion issues, but how you are going to not make their lives harder, essentially, by building what you want to build. That's kind of, it's a very, broad overview and a gross oversimplification, but pretty accurate. In terms of the county, stormwater is in a very similar situation as several other issues in the state, where the state does not dictate several items related to stormwater. So there's not a state regulation that says any county has to implement a stormwater plan. The state does not regulate whether or not you even keep your drains up. Now, there is a statutory requirement for the surveyor to maintain, and there's some statutory requirements there. But those drains are not, as regulated drains, and that whole issue is not the same thing as a stormwater plan. Like, not really even close.
Sure.
It is like the difference between the drinking water and the sewage. Like, it is that different. Like, yes, they all flow through pipes. Yes, they carry a liquid, but no, you don't want the two to mix, okay? That's a pretty good
Yeah.
example. Surveyors, many of them can do the calculations, but it is a horrible, very bad idea to have the regulator drafting the plan. So if you're going to have a surveyor who reviews stormwater plans, they cannot be in the business of creating the plans. You do not have to have an engineering degree to do the equations that we talked about, just like what you said. You think about stormwater as, if rain falls on grass, there's a number, they're all established, and it's very consistent across the state. Probably, I would guess each region probably it's adjusted for their climate and their soil type. But there's overall a pretty well accepted percentage of infiltration. So if you think about it in terms of an inch of rain falling on a piece of something, an inch of rain, it might be like 0.3 inches of rain would run off of grass. When you get an inch of rain on it, 0.3 might run off. I don't know the actual number, but for example, if an inch of rain falls on a roof, an inch of rain is going to come off of the roof. So the calculations and the math are not regulated, they're not statutory, but they are very well established engineering and architectural principles. So it's very, very standard. Now, how most counties implement stormwater, and not all counties do, the three ways I see it across the state are either one, stormwater? No stormwater? That they're just probably even worse than us in some counties. Number two, they understand that stormwater is an issue, but they don't have an ordinance about it. So they direct their surveyor to coach and counsel contractors to comply with non-existent rules. Quite frankly, like Randolph County is a good example of that. Their surveyor is, Jay County. Jay County's surveyor is really good. He's sharp. Everybody likes him, and people just get along with it because he helps provide them easy and implementable issue. You see what I mean? Like, it kind of works out because the person in the position. I don't believe that that's sustainable long term, because if somebody, whatever. The third option on stormwater plans that I see counties doing is they either the APC drafts in a stormwater specific ordinance that is included in the zoning code or the subdivision control code or somehow under the umbrella of zoning. The APC drafts, of course the commissioners approve, a stormwater ordinance that has, okay, we know we are going to use this table of numbers, my 0.3 and one issue, that kind of thing. In Fayette County, we are going to follow this number. We're going to use this equation, and you have to submit these 5 things using this math to get approval. In those counties, they would submit them to Bill, and Bill would go, okay, there's 5 items that are on the list, and these 5 items, the title of them are all here. Then Bill would take it to the surveyor, and the surveyor, this is where I don't understand. He does not take that to the drainage board. It is not under the drainage board authority. But because he has the information about how water works, the surveyor always reviews them in every county. If the surveyor is not capable technically of doing that, they farm it out. They give it to an engineering firm to review. So,
And the surveyor just makes a recommendation.
the surveyor says, yes, it meets, no, it doesn't. Usually in those cases, in the counties that have their own stormwater ordinance, I will tell you, if they take the time to draft an ordinance, they have done so because they've had a problem, and it is extensive, it is long, it is hard to comply with. They are hard counties. If you go the route of a very extensive stormwater ordinance, they're hard to do business in. They really are. Unless you are a large company that already has an engineering firm that knows how to put it all together. If you are DNA and you're hiring a local firm, like if I were going to build in Fayette County and we had a stormwater ordinance, I would be looking for an engineer that is probably, out of Indy. I would not even, wouldn't even think twice. And it would add about $10,000 to the bill of permitting. So to say that you have to have a drainage plan that's approved by the drainage board is not the same thing as stormwater reduction and control. So that's the education portion. I'm willing to take questions.
Have you seen counties that have a drainage plan versus a stormwater ordinance? Like you're using those as two different things, correct?
Sure.
Yes,
So
because
this drainage plan is how we kind of presume it would be, but that's not really something that happens. So really it'd be a stormwater ordinance that we have to draft.
Okay.
My concern about that is that's all very technical, and we have the one guy here that's going to be responsible for it. It's not here to talk about.
yes.
It's to me, it seems like it'd be a very technical thing, and quite honestly, as technical as it would get, we might be drafting something that we don't fully understand, and that's
100%. So I will say there is one follow-up that I'm glad it spurred my memory. The state of Indiana, IDEM, is very interested in the stormwater issue. EPA is asking them to be interested in stormwater. So every year their stormwater regulatory policies keep, quite frankly, they're just out of bounds. Like they're doing regulatory overreach like crazy on stormwater. They're reaching out in ways that they have no authority to do so, and nobody's challenging them. by the same token, it will not take long for their rules to catch up to their overreach. Like, they will get that done, that will happen. There is right now the state is re-looking at all of the Rule 5, which is the erosion, the construction erosion portion of it. They're redrafting all of their guidance and all of their rules and policy documents around that. They are also, the way it was presented to me was, they do not have committee meetings yet on the language. That IDEM, they believe, everybody that I know in the stormwater world believes that IDEM is working on a statewide standardization of, this is the table of coefficients, this is the equation we're gonna use. They believe that it will, my guess is, based on those conversations, within 2 years, there will be a statewide, the very least, standardization of this is what we wanna see. I believe that will also include a mandate to the counties to implement said standard.
When we get all the numbers and let's say we understand the numbers, and there's this much water being displaced, what do they have to typically show for it to be approved? They have to show this much vacant land that they can move the water to, or they have to show this type of drain that they can move the water to, or?
Usually the way that it works, and you were really pretty close on your, you have to maintain it for a certain rain event or whatever. So what they do is they say, all right, now that we know how much extra water, this is, current conditions are X. We're gonna build something and create Y more of water. Then they either design retention ponds or they can make, they are not waterways, but visually they look that way. Like a field waterway, you think about a flat bottomed, really gentle sloping. And then, I always get the word wrong, so I'm not gonna try to use it. I'm gonna explain it and hope y'all can look up the word later. They slow the water down. So think about straw bales, that's not what they use, but if you think about a straw bale in a waterway, it slows the water down so that the release rate is the same as it was before. So what you are approving on a stormwater plan isn't anything to do with the tile it's going to. Yes, you have to know about that tile, you have to know about that end release or whatever. You have to be able to back figure from there. But the plan is, okay, this is current conditions, this is what we're gonna do, and here's how we are going to make sure that when the water leaves here, it is no greater than that. That includes like I said, a stormwater pond, a waterway, the things that slow the water down, or like a regulator kind of concept. Again, I always get the word wrong, I'm gonna try. And there is a whole host of ideas and best management practices. There's books on things that you can do. With the exception of Wells County, who will only, I think it's a staff problem, not a knowledge problem. Wells County, all you get to do is build a pond. Like, you're gonna build a pond, you're gonna store water, and you're gonna discharge it at a certain rate. Like, I don't think that's their ordinance, but that's practically what happens. Does that help any?
With that in mind, Jeff, could the language in our, just a blanket,
A stormwater usage.
I think
plan.
comply with any county or statewide stormwater ordinance. And then that way, when we implement a stormwater ordinance, or the state does, then it's already, the language is already in there. But if we wait to do anything with any ordinances until, I have a feeling this is not going to be a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
well, I guess what I was getting ready to say was, with what she said, could we just put language in our ordinances, not just CAFO, but any and all of our ordinances, that any infrastructure is built, you must submit a plan that retains the storm runoff at the same rate,
Development rate.
the before development rate.
Yeah, I think you could work on that language.
I mean,
Yeah, the
I'm just,
language is probably, yeah.
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
concept, the concept.
I mean, that's our main goal, is that water does not leave their property any faster than
But what
it
do you-
did
so-
before development.
But I'm assuming this plan is not drafted by a contractor, this plan is drafted by an engineer of some variety.
Surveyor.
So my concern would be is you've got a $40,000 pole barn being put up, and they've got to spend $10,000 on engineering fees to figure out that plan. I mean, we've got to be careful what we,
Yeah, I know, but
Well,
I will say.
What happened-
it makes sense on $1 million structure, it doesn't make sense on the 3-car garage.
Just looking at the square footage of
But,
the area.
but they,
this
I mean,
place-
they'd still have to do it in, I mean, somebody's doing it in the city, because they recalculate every building that's, for
In
their
the
fee
city-
structure.
In the city, if you are disturbing, I don't believe they make homeowners do it, but if you are disturbing much of anything, you're making a $10,000, $12,000 plan to comply with their MS4.
Well, I thought,
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's doing those calculations.
If you build a garage in the city, you don't think it's residential, it's only commercial.
Commercial.
Yes,
Yeah.
like it's new ground, it's that kind of thing. Now,
Okay.
I will
That took
say,
a while for the Dollar General.
yeah, I will say, most of the ordinances, again, with a few exceptions of counties who, I mean, we've all seen knee-jerk reaction, you know, you don't like something, so you make an ordinance that's so hard, you know, right, so that has happened, some counties have used stormwater to get that accomplished, right? So, excluding that, and I completely lost what I was, train of thought is just gone.
But my thoughts are, well, she's thinking is, let's make it as simple and easy as possible, but yet protect our adjacent property owners
Yes, so
at the same time.
the point, like I finally remembered it, most of them have a minimum disturbance or a minimum impervious surface number, which is usually fairly large. So that you're not having to do a $10,000 plan for a 40 by 40 barn. Now, that standardization is, you know, one of the things that concerns me with your idea on comply, you know, just do the right thing, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
is that, yes, there is an, you know, fairly accepted, you know, most folks go to this engineering standard to get their numbers from. I would argue, depending on what you wanted to do, you can find numbers that will support a greater burden or a lesser burden. And unless you say, we are going to use this number, and then the more you continue to try to draft that, like, it's like 4-H livestock rules. If you make a rule, they're gonna find a way to get around it 10 different ways, and then you make 10 rules, and then you end up with 30, and because
Yeah.
if you make a rule, there's gonna be somebody trying to figure a way around it, like
And
that's the.
Well, and
That's
Gary,
my fear
honestly,
of all that.
For the time being, like, if we include a stormwater plan, I would think that the simplest way for somebody to comply would to build a retention pond on a, if something is large enough, like a retention pond's probably the simplest way.
And I don't think it's inappropriate at all to require them to submit a plan
Right.
and have them sell us on the plan. Like,
Yeah.
here's the, and there might not be a visible line that we have to guide us, but at least it's something thoroughly thought out.
And that leaves room for personal,
Absolutely.
yes or no.
Well, I mean, absolutely.
May I offer, I said I wouldn't, but may I offer my advice? Is that, like, or my opinion?
Yeah.
My opinion is that, like, I will say the stormwater really concerns me. And I believe if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said, we need to draft a stormwater plan, like, or a stormwater ordinance. Because it's an issue, it's gonna continue to be an issue, especially in the county. The city can take care of itself, it's doing its own thing, it's already protected. In the county, it is a problem, it's gonna continue to be a problem, and it's not gonna go away. And we need a stormwater ordinance, we need a way to address it. Like, I probably kind of had things to come here and say, please, for the love of God, draft a stormwater plan. Given my conversations and knowing everything else that we have to do as a county, I think if we're patient and we put in our ordinances about that you have to, I like your idea of you have to comply with any state or local ordinances. I think if we're patient, I think the state will do it for us. That's my opinion. And I'm happy to come back, 3 and 6 months and say, yes, I think we're still on track. And I think y'all know me well enough. I'll come back in 6 months and go, yeah, it's dead in the water, and we need to rethink it. We need to go back. But that's my opinion.
Jeff, If I recall, it's when the MS4 with the city of Connersville, it's from 1 to 5 acres. I think it's over 5 acres, unless it's changed. If over 5 acres, then that went to the IDEM. Has that been changed from about 15 years ago?
Well, the way that anything over an acre goes to the city, and then if the city does not feel like they can or have the ability or want to review it, they can kick it to IDEM to review.
Because I know there's a threshold above which the local MS4 was required to review. Above that, and it was kicked up as IDEM's responsibility.
Now, it's my understanding from other projects, not from Fayette County, but I have worked in other communities where you submit something for an MS4 that is, 6 acres, that's easy, and the MS4 will review it. I've also seen an acre that was very complex, there was lots of things proposed, and they have requested and received IDEM's review help. Because, to kind of help a little bit, when it comes to that construction erosion that we're talking about at Rule 5, that is actually an IDEM plan, that's an IDEM permit. So the construction erosion is already established and is regulated by IDEM. And if the county, I haven't proposed anything in Fayette County long enough, but I would suppose it works, this is the way it works in Jay County and Randolph County. If you go to do business in those counties, you have to create an erosion construction plan that has these same principles that I just talked about. During the time of disturbance, we're going to change how much water we discharge by this. This is how we're going to control it. We're going to put in silt fence. We're going to, honestly, for the projects I work in, we put in silt fence because we're going out in an 80-acre field and building something, and we have to prove we're not going to have erosion in the middle of an 80-acre field. It seems ridiculous, but we have to show that. So we build silt fence on all 4 sides because it's easier than explaining how topography works.
Right.
But we submit that plan. We actually submit that to the Stormwater Conservation District. That is the only time that Stormwater Conservation Districts have anything to do with stormwater. We submit that to them. They all have engineering firms and or IDEM that reviews the plan. Once that's done, as an applicant, they review it, we public notice it, we submit it to IDEM, you have your permit.
Because the last time we did that was were those new smaller sections for Mason out there. And those are the last ones that we actually had to send up to have the SWCD go through.
Yeah, there are very few SWCDs that have the technical staff on site that can review them themselves. And again, like we talked about variability of implementation, there are some counties where if you are building in the county and if you're going to build a hog barn, some counties willfully ignore the Rule 5 requirements, I would say. I don't believe that's right or should be done. But most counties are really pretty good about, hey, when they come in to get their building permit, just so you know, you're gonna need a Rule 5, make sure you get it. And then if they don't get it, most planning directors are the ones that are, every now and then you'll run into an SWCD person who is on fire for their job and they're driving around looking for stuff, but usually it's a plan director. So, does anybody have any other questions about the technical parts of that, or?
No, it's clear as mud now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I got
It was
it.
just mildly silty before that.
Yeah.
So with the addition of, under 9, I think, under the, submission requirements, if we added, stormwater plan that complies with any state and county stormwater ordinance, if we added that, below the approved drainage plan, do we think that would meet the standard and suffice for? I mean, even though right now there's not necessarily anything, and if there's not anything in place, then you meet the standard because it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, you have to have a plan.
Yeah, you have to submit a plan.
We're gonna put the water and put it here and that's
Yeah.
gonna work.
Yeah.
But
I don't
is
know
this
if it takes care
something,
of Gary's concerns though.
is this something that needs to be in each individual ordinance? I mean, like the CFO
We
ordinance?
could have a
Yeah, this-
stormwater ordinance like she was talking
Yeah,
about.
this
Why,
would be
why
completely
couldn't we just put the, because my concerns is we need to cover all commercial buildings.
Yeah,
So do we go back and rewrite every,
true, yeah.
or do we just put it in our, I don't, put it somewhere at the beginning of our ordinance?
Well,
Or,
because the one place we do have something like that is in the subdivision regulation.
yeah, see,
Now something comparable, and there are also more contemporary subdivision plans or drainage ways to manage drainage that don't require hard engineering, such as your preferences to avoid retention ponds, detention ponds. And as Carrie was referring to, were the swales and the things that very slow down the rate of the water as it's moving through the system of swales.
Most of the counties that have stormwater ordinances, they did not go back into all of the
Individual.
individual ordinances and add the language, but all the individual ordinances say that, or there is a blanket understanding, I'm not sure, Bill.
Must
mentioned this,
comply with XYZ.
well, that you have to have an improvement location permit. And so what they did is they added into their improvement location permit guidelines that you have to comply with the stormwater. That's, other
So that might
counties
be the
say.
easiest.
they
yeah,
don't
that
do
might be
anything that way.
easier, so that we hit, we
Everybody.
wouldn't,
Yeah.
we don't want to create a
potential- yeah.
loophole by forgetting to add it to one of,
And
Exactly.
we can have it state in that ILP language that essentially says that this is required for every
yeah,
permit issued by the department.
yeah. Okay, I'm more happy with that than trying to pick out each individual subject.
And then Bill has provided a map of what is the current CFO ordinance with the mile separations and land that's
Well, I know you
available.
guys are familiar with it, but you probably a long time since you've seen them.
It's framed them all.
Oh, good.
And in this potential proposed ordinance, those are actually all
On your
reduced
dartboard?
to a quarter mile. So all the ones that say 1 mile are actually reduced to, it says 1,320 feet, which is a quarter mile.
And, yeah, and it will increase area by reducing those. But as you can see right there with the amount of the rural sprawl in Fayette County, it'll increase the land area, but I really can't say yet how much. I need to contact the WTH so I can have them come down and a little bit of an education. So I can then actually create a map of what it's going to look like with everything reduced down a quarter mile.
But we could probably have that for our public hearing.
You have to do that for when it comes time for the public hearing. I'll try to do that, yep, because I think that would be important to show.
I do too.
It depends, when would we like, I guess that's the next question is, when would we like to move to a public hearing?
I think before we do a public hearing, I think it would behoove the Area Plan Commission to have the language that the board wants. Make it clear at the public meeting that, okay, the language is clear, we all accept it, the board members accept it, and then to set the actual hearing. Because to set a hearing before you haven't completed the actual public meeting language, and then expect some changes then at the next public hearing. I think that's just a problem. But, yeah, and so I think that whatever with the language of this is, people are, one more time, put next public hearing, then if everybody is pleased with the actual way language went with that part on the drainage, I think then we can set a public hearing. All the plan commission members are happy with it.
Right, well, and when we did this in September,
Because, well, what I'm saying is that you want to make sure at a public meeting, because everybody there who's going to watch it is going to see exactly what you're proposing. Because then if you're making a change before a public meeting, and then you have a public hearing rather than a public meeting to go over it, it looks like you're slipping something by people. We know it's not necessarily the case, but you want to have the language ready before you actually, that everybody sees, everybody can know, members of the public can get their copy of it, that everybody's gonna know what it is before the
Okay.
public hearing.
So I guess I have a question with that, and what Bill's saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, Bill, by no means. But if we don't do anything with the language on the plan, because we're gonna put it in
Somewhere else, yeah.
somewhere else, then this language has already been voted on, hasn't it?
This hasn't.
Okay.
I thought we voted to go to a public hearing last
Yeah.
November with this
Yes.
language.
Yes,
We did, and then we
Yes.
canceled public hearing.
so,
Yes.
yeah, so,
Because
This has
we
it,
also have different language that was also added since then.
yes, the words, proof of a drainage plan was added to,
But what I'm saying is if we don't add that, if we end up not adding that to this ordinance,
right, it is what we, in
it is
November,
what we
yes.
voted on, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes,
So I mean, if we don't change, if we don't add that drainage plan to this specific ordinance
mhm,
requirements, the requirements of a drainage plan, then this ordinance has been approved by this board. To go to
It's been
public
moved
hearing.
On this issue to take it to
Yeah.
a public hearing.
Yes.
I still think it makes sense to have to have a motion on that. I mean, I get what you're saying.
Right.
This ordinance in effect has already been essentially desired to be pushed to a public hearing, but
And then
there's no
just-
harm in seeing if we want to do that.
And do you think it would be appropriate then to have the members who are missing to then vote on it, especially since one of them is the county surveyor?
I mean, we have a quorum.
Yeah, we do have
Yeah,
one.
we haven't got a quorum, so.
so do we want to, intend on an April public hearing, so that would be the 22nd?
I would advise not doing it on the 22nd because that's the only time we have an opportunity to get the training in. And as we also have the zoning board meeting is, something could take a long time before we get to the zoning board. I would recommend having this at a special meeting.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I think it should
Because
be a
it could
special.
detract from any other business that the
Yeah.
plan commission and the zoning board may have.
And we deal with just this on the
Mhm.
agenda,
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. President, I would make a motion that we approve, yes, we approve the proposed language for the CAFO ordinance as presented without the drainage language.
Sorry, I was looking for my calendar.
For approve it, to take it to a public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll say.
We have a motion and a second. I think we should do a roll call vote on this. To move the proposed confined feeding operation ordinance to a public hearing.
Ready?
Yes.
Darren Price,
Yes.
Leoto King,
Yes.
Brian Durham,
Yes.
Dale Menson, Gary Naylor,
Yes.
Brian Robb,
Yes.
and that's all I can know.
Okay.
Okay.
So we will move to a public hearing. Do we want to set a date for a special
Well,
meeting tonight?
we don't necessarily know the date because of alternative locations, we don't have something set up yet. But we can move forward and we do not actually need the date yet to authorize setting up the public hearing. Is that correct, Jeff?
As long as we,
Properly advertised in
Yeah.
you
sufficient
have
time.
to give 10 days notice for the public hearing in advance.
Can that be a decision of the executive?
It can,
Board.
the executive and the president, you know,
Yeah. To set that date and,
Okay, what I'll do is so we talked after the last meeting, I don't know if we'd be able to get something at the school, out there at the school before school's out, but I will look at in the meantime with the,
The last 2 weeks of April, I presume, is what we're looking at.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah, I would think so.
so
I
I
think
will,
the last week will be better for me than the first.
Any day but that Thursday would be all right.
Right.
The 29th is,
It's just my calendar in the evenings gets kind of tricky, but that fourth week is always good for me.
But you're not good for Thursday, right? The 29th?
No, we're just,
I'm not good for the 29th. No, that's the chamber annual dinner, so I'll be there.
Well, you can't get out of that?
Yeah. No,
You don't want to get out of it?
After 1 year of it, you may want to.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll look initially also at with the Miller Building.
say at the-
Now, the question I have is if both the state of Indiana and then also the city then drops the social distancing part and the actual number of people, also look at would you also like to look at the possibility of having the public hearing here? But that would be dependent upon what actually goes.
no,
on.
I mean,
I think I have them set up to Miller Building.
yeah, we had,
I think you're gonna have enough attention that.
was it 3 weeks ago at the Miller Building? I thought that worked out well in there.
Did you hear back there?
Yeah, I could hear just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it worked out well.
As long as you got a good sound system.
Yeah, and I thought
Better
that,
than
I
the park
think they just
department
use
does.
it. I'll talk to the people in the city and see if I can get them to set up the same exact
Yeah.
setup.
If you can get Chad's sound system.
other things in the zoning code to talk about under number 2, I had sent out a kind of a revised solar facility with some different language, including permit fees, raising based on information provided by Jeff. So went to a megawatt hour. So potentially, if a person wanted a 1,000 megawatt system in Fayette County, the permitting fee would be around $185,000, which is not unheard of because it was copied from 3 other counties that had that particular language. And the megawatt hour seemed the easiest, like, just seemed, yeah, the easiest way to determine. Because I think eventually in efficiencies, I mean, they'll be able to have more megawatts on a smaller piece of land in the future, and you're gonna potentially draw more.
And the fee
Money.
seems high. It seems very high when you consider that any type of fee that we generally, you have to understand they're building something that, I mean, if you thought of it as all one building, they're building, 500 acre building or something. You know what I mean? So it is going to take a lot of time from the office. So I think the fees are very important. I mean, so much time that it would almost, I mean, you might even have to hire a part-time guy to help bill. So I mean, it's a significant expense. So I think that rate is appropriate.
Such as maybe hiring a firm to help me
Not
watch over
necessarily,
that.
but just somebody to help him go out and check on things
Right.
and, I mean, yeah.
But they gotta know what they're doing.
Okay, well, one thing related to that, because I know Brian sent the thing out regarding accessory uses.
Yeah.
Now, the model code, and then also a lot of the other ordinances have been adopted, they deal with the accessory uses, but they're calling each of them out specifically. So, I mean, the process is, I'm inserting from what Brian prepared, along with other ordinances, how things are fitting within the actual model code, so the board members can also see what else has actually been adopted out there. And I mean, Brian's done it a lot, and I appreciate what he's done. I think there's also some other things I personally think that there's other things we really probably need to look at and consider before we end up with a final form for this.
Other inclusions are a removal requirement that was not in the first go-around. And I thought it was pretty specific on removal, like on what was required as far as removal. And again, it was borrowed from another county's ordinance. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Somebody already had a removal requirement that seemed pretty, substantial. I borrowed it. A bonding requirement, which appeared in 7 or 8 of the ordinances that are already in existence. And again, it was not trying to reinvent the wheel here, just taking what somebody else had already done and trying to tailor it to Fayette County to meet the requirement. And then there were some things that I felt were on removal that's about replacing grasses and trees that were there or prohibited you from taking out your blocked trees and grasses that you had planted, so if you wanted to farm that, you couldn't take those trees out to farm it again. It just seems a weird language to prohibit that, and then treating your house and a business that's producing energy for itself differently than somebody who is trying to wholesale it to a distributor. And that's what Bill was referring to on getting that mesh together, correct, Bill?
Yeah, because I think in particular with the different types of uses, some are looking at the, strictly as the accessory use, then they're looking at a mid-size use, and then working their way, scaling up to, some are just referring as large-scale use, others are actually specifically referring to them as solar farms. It's actually calling out, so making sure that you're not just generally referring to accessory uses, but you're calling out every type of, based on the actual size. Because the review that you're gonna look at is gonna depend on the amount of review you're gonna require, based on the actual size. And based on the size, and there's the potential for the, potential negative effects to neighboring property owners. So, like I said, I didn't get as much done because I'm now in the process of really just reformatting and reorganizing everything so that it'll still be a lot for board members, but it'll give you a good idea of what's everything that's out there. Those who go ahead and look through those.
Right, I think the important part is that you don't have somebody who at their home or their business is intentionally trying to overproduce to try to make money on the utility. Like you know, the average home, for instance, uses about 887 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. So if you have somebody who is producing 10,000 kilowatt hours, like it's not a whole lot of money because we have net metering here, and you're getting the wholesale rate. You're getting about 4.3 cents per kilowatt hour, but over a 20-some year lifetime, like it's a good chunk of change that you were intentionally trying to get more than your fair share, I guess, and making sure that if you reach a certain threshold that there are other requirements than, just hooking up a UV inverter and a 1,000-watt system at your house. That way you can provide your own energy. I think it's a balance thing. That way you're not intentionally overproducing. But, I mean, there's going to be overproduction. Like, it happens, and that's the nature. I mean, there's days that it's sunnier than, today was cloudy, yesterday was sunny. I mean, if you even look at the city's production, if you follow theirs, I actually have it bookmarked, so I can, it shows you how much they're producing on a given day. There are times that you produce more than what you need, but the idea is to find that happy median in there. And then accessory uses. Bill, do you want to talk about accessory uses tonight?
No, I think we probably talked enough right now this evening because we do have a petition for the zoning board for the Eklunds, and I know that Mrs. Eklund needs to get out of here pretty quickly.
Yeah, if I can stay seated, I
Yeah.
work on the black ice, and after an ambulance ride, I'm walking, but that's about it right now.
Okay. Yeah, so that'll be after this then with the zoning board.
So if you do have a chance, please review that. It comes from some things that Darren, myself, and Bill talked about prior to COVID, getting some things changed. So,
And always seeing other things to add to it. Yep.
rules and procedure. The only thing that I had on that is something that I had missed. Technically, we need one more person on our executive committee. We only have two, Mr. Stewart and myself. The rules say that one of you serves on the executive committee at the discretion of the board, so we elect a person to serve on the executive committee. Is there any volunteers to serve on the executive committee? Darren? I would take that in the form of a motion to make Darren the,
I'd make that.
do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, Darren is the third member of the executive committee. Director's report.
Including in the package to everybody.
Yeah. For of January on, and February. We noticed that we're ahead of last year, and last year was better than the year before in terms of total permits issued, so we're ahead, already this year, even with, you know, astronomical prices of materials, so that's a good thing. If there are no questions for Bill, I'd take a motion to accept the director's report as presented.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Director's report approved. Adjournment.
So moved.
Have a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
now declare the March 25th, 2021 BZA meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Carrie,
Yes, here.
Bill Crawford,
Here.
Jeff Fisher,
Here.
Darren Price,
Here.
Leota King,
Here.
Bill McDaniel, Jeff Wessling, and myself.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda is a public hearing for Lynette Eklund for a temporary use of mobile home for a family member. You want to come up and, I guess, well, you don't have to come, you can stay where you're at. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll let you say a word.
Just briefly, my mom became widowed thanks to COVID back in March. My dad was number 7 for the county. And so I've been trying to help her with just general care. She's still fairly independent, but she does need extra care, doesn't drive, that kind of stuff. And so I'm wanting a temporary permit to have a trailer there so that she can share our property. We've got 35 acres, so that she can have her own place, but I can be able to take care of her a little bit more.
Okay, everybody read all the information that Bill put out? Okay,
Move to close
no conversation, no questions, no, everybody good?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm open for a motion,
I say, well, I move to close the public hearing first.
okay? All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Second.
Yes,
You need a second first, I think. You second it, Lo.
she seconded it, yes,
And,
okay.
sorry.
Yes. Oh, that's
That's
all right.
okay.
All right, all those opposed, motion carries. Okay, now,
I move to approve the temporary use for the mobile home living quarters for Lynette Eklund.
I'll second.
all right, motion made and properly seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Here we go. Okay. Next on the agenda is a comprehensive plan, was you out there, James, to listen to all that other stuff?
I got here about 7:15.
You probably caught most of that. So, anybody have anything on the comprehensive plan? Anything on the zoning code? Other than what was already spoken about previously?
I'll go through it all again. Everybody, I got,
Rules of procedure?
I actually have one thing on rules of procedure that's actually for the area plan commission, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Like, I have been tasked with and took on working on the rules of procedure updates. I will tell you, like, with work, I have not had an opportunity to do that. If someone else, like, if I'm happy to pass that baton, I'm also happy to keep it on my to-do list in hopes that I find time. That's sort of a pleasure of the folks. I feel bad because I don't usually take this long to do things, so if somebody else would like it,
I think we just leave her right where she's at. don't you? I think that was a great plan. All those in favor?
You could then send me a copy electronically, everything that you pulled together then.
Okay.
Everything you have electronically.
it's a lot, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, no, send it to me, yeah.
Knowing the county's storage requirements, I'll probably put it on a PDF and bring it, or on a stick and bring it to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, I'd rather have it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, next is the director's report.
I move to approve the report. So there's two in there.
As presented.
As presented, yeah.
Okay, we got a motion made to approve it as presented. I need a second.
I'll second.
Second.
All right, we got a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?